This episode of Legends, the series, is brought to you by these fine companies.
At the end of my career, I could never really imagine some of the things I've done and what I did, starting out at 17 years old, not having a clue in life of what I was going to do, not even thinking I was going to drive a race car the rest of my life. I'm pretty darn proud of it. I had a lot of people, like Ed McCulloch and I talked about it. I don't think there's hardly anybody other than us racers could sit down and talk about the times we had. And to go, like basically your early day barnstormers and stuff, you go race one place one night, and next race you race 300 miles away, racing somewhere else. And when I drove Mickey Thompson's car with Steve Montrelli, we raced 9 races in 14 days over a July 4th weekend. And none of these guys who drive funny cars now could ever do that. I don't think there's enough parts in a team. But it's a good feeling to say that I was part of that. I raced quarter midgets when I was a younger kid, and my next door neighbor built himself a junior field dragster. And he's given everybody who helped work on the car, do everything, a chance to drive his car before he went into the service. I grew up with Skip all my life. I don't ever remember Skip not being there. I got in the car and I weighed 117 pounds, and everybody was probably closer to 180. In junior field, a lightweight car meant quite a bit. And I went out and I ran really quick and fast in the car, and I thought, oh, this is a pretty neat deal. We might be able to do something here. And Skip went off in the service, and his co-partner, Glenn Dobbs, decided we'd go run a few races, and we did. And then I just ended up meeting other people and asked to drive other cars, and it kind of went on from there. Well, funny cars had just started they had come from the other classes and stuff like that, and funny cars had just getting up and going. And the person I met was Charlie Wilson, and the car he had, it was actually, I guess it was considered a fuel altered. It was a Corvette with a 93-inch wheelbase, and it ran a big block Chevy on nitro and blown. And so it was kind of a crummy handling car at the time, and he asked me if I'd be interested in trying to drive it. And I did. It worked out okay. It did pretty well, and just going on tour and becoming a funny car guy just because I was never even offered a good ride in a front engine top fuel car or anything at the time, and it eventually became my career. Well, funny cars just seemed to be the thing for me. I didn't think dragsters were what I wanted, and I could relate to the funny cars as to like regular street cars and stuff. And you get to talking to some of the people who come down and talk to you, and they had a Corvette or they had a GTO or something like that. And I always rather liked the funny cars.
Was it because of the ill handling or what? Did it just seem natural to you?
When you're 17 years old and you're getting something like that, you're too dumb to think about how ill handling it is, or even that you could get hurt. Well, funny cars just seemed to be the thing for me. The ill handling part of it wasn't such a major thing. Is what you have to relate to the fans, as guys that come down and, oh, I have a GTO, or I have a Camaro, or I have this and everything. And at the time, they related the funny cars to their real cars. And that, to me, was pretty slick. You know, and people, I'm from Van Nuys, California. At that time, Van Nuys is a very big cruising capital. And people come down and ask about that and everything. And the funny cars just seemed to grow a better fan base to me at the time. I had never had really any intentions of going on and racing my own car or being a crew chief and driver, you know, and doing it as a business. You know, I wasn't scheduled to be a dancer or a doctor, and it seemed to be doing okay for a living for me. When Mickey Thompson called me up, and he didn't even know who I was, I don't think. And I came down, I talked to him and stuff, and he decided, well, we're going to give you a try.
Dale Pulde in the red car will be on the outside lane from Wilmington, California. Pulde qualified 7th. Roger Lindemood qualified 11th.
He would work right along with you. If you're in the shop at 2 o'clock in the morning, you could probably expect Mickey to come in there and start digging through things so he had something on his mind. And he always had something on his mind. And one of the things he told me was, he says, you go and do this, and you take the car on your own like I ended up doing in '73, he says, it's going to be like a college education. And it was. And Mickey held you to your word, and he stuck by it the best as you could let him get away with. And he was definitely a businessman. Well, Mickey would be in California, and you'd be racing the car, and you tell him, well, I'm having this kind of problem or that kind of problem, and Mickey wouldn't believe you. No, that can't happen. That's not going to happen. Then he'd come back, and he'd see that what you were talking to him about really did happen. Well, then from there on, he was looking for a solution. Mickey is always looking for some kind of a solution or a way to go quicker and faster or a way to just do better every time, which basically he instilled that upon myself and other people that worked for him.
Now the finals of the funny car is coming up, and here's one of the drivers who we were able to squeeze over and talk to, Dale Pulde. Dale, I was just talking to Ed. You guys have had some squabbles together, haven't you?
Yeah, we sure have. We've run each other a lot of times, and at Indy, he beat me in the finals there, and I got to try to beat him this time real hard. I got to win this one.
When's the last time you beat him?
I haven't really. I got to do it now.
Well, good luck.
Well, and I drove the Pinto and Steve Montrelli was the tuner, and he was basically the boss. I drove it in '71 and '72, and I probably still have all the burned up fire suits to prove it. But it's just, we ran the 429 Ford, and nobody else had anything like that and stuff. But Steve and I learned a lot. We learned together, and Steve taught me a real lot. So when it come time at the end of '72, the Grand Am came about, and we ran it at the last race at Lyons. And then the last race was over, everything all came apart to go get painted and all this stuff. And around Christmas time, Mickey calls me and says, I made a deal with Butch Moss. I said, what? You know, and I kind of looked at the phone like, oh, that kind of surprised me. It came out of the blue. And so I was out of a job. Butch Moss ran the car for a couple of races and got hurt in a fire in Gainesville. And Mickey called, wanted to know, if I was interested. And I said, well, I'd like to know why I got put out to start with. He didn't think that I wanted to take the car on my own and try running it and being my own crew chief. And that was quite a chore, quite an undertaking for a kid at 23 years old to be driving for Mickey Thompson and having to go travel around the country and race. It was a lot of work, and it was, just like he said. At the very last race I ran in '74, I set both ends to the national record and gave him the car back. I couldn't make it the way things were going as a business, because when you took a car from Mickey Thompson, after the Danny Ongais days with the Mustangs, you were a partner with Mickey. When that car left home, you had to return with everything that it left with. And a little worse for wear, but it had to be runnable. So if you went out and crashed a car or blew the body off, that part of that came out of your profits at the end. So it was definitely a learning curve by most means, and I learned a lot, and it was probably one of the best experiences of my life. When Mickey was killed, Mickey and Trudy were killed, I was driving a truck for a local cement company hauling freight, or hauling bulk cement on off times, and wasn't too far from Mickey's house, and when they said a racing star and champion and all this stuff had been murdered, right away it hit me that it had to be Mickey. And I don't know why, it just hit me on the whole thing, and came in, and it just it's like a part of your life just erased. And I really think a lot of Mickey's sister Colleen. She and I went toe to toe several times over, paint jobs on cars and different things, but all in the end we were all in there for Mickey and ourselves. And to lose somebody like that, it's just I can't even explain it. It just and it's just like even the racers we have nowadays, because they are older than me, and I hear about one or I hear somebody sick or what all, it takes a lot out of you.
Was there anything that you had wanted to tell Mickey before he left? Or?
Thank you. He gave me a part of my life I never thought would happen. The name and the legend of the War Eagle started out as Mike and I trying to figure out what we're going to name this car. And I called Steve Evans, I believe Steve Gibbs and a few others to find out, what they thought of different names and stuff, and any ideas, because the Blue Max, everybody knew who the Blue Max was, and it was a great looking car and it ran really good. So that's something you wanted to go out and compete against for popularity for your car. So Steve Evans told me, so we'll just put Dale Pulde on the side of it. No, that's not kind of what we wanted to do to it. So one night Mike decided he's going to go to the library and just look for famous names and stuff that was good. Like, again, Gary Bergen had the Orange Baron. I don't know if it ever really existed or not, but that was Gary Bergen's moniker. So Mike comes home, and I'm laying back in the chair, vegging out on something, and he came in with these names and stuff, and I said, what about this deal here? We're watching this cowboy movie, and here's War Eagle. I said, the Indian fits the Pontiac, and I said, this guy's pretty badass. So we thought about it and talked, so I spent the next day on the phone calling back Steve Evans and those again. Steve said, that's a really good name. That's a good, catchy name. I didn't even know there was a War Eagle boat at the time, and the painter we used to paint our cars, Bill Carter, painted it. Nobody said a word to us about it. And Steve Montrelli called me one day, and he says, the guys who got that War Eagle boat, the alcohol boat, they're worried about how you'll handle the name and how you'll represent it. And he says, I told them, don't worry about it. They need to hold up their end. And that was Montrelli and I. We always stick up for each other anyway. We raced good together. He was part of my start with Mickey. So that's the War Eagle name and how it came about. It stuck. The people liked it, and especially down south. They liked. I had no idea that Alabama was the War Eagle deal country or anything of the sort, but it worked out really well. The reason we did the War Eagle like we did is we wanted people to remember the car. And the cars of nowadays, there's some of them, some of the Schumacher cars and stuff, they'll have real paint on them. Johnny Gray's car was one of them. Scotty Cannon's car was one of them. They had a paint job which gave them something to remember along with the name. And I always like good-looking cars. I like them detailed. I like a painted frame. I like a lot of that stuff. And so we put that into every one of them we did. Through the paint jobs and the name and everything, we were able to come up with a T-shirt design. Our first ones we thought were hideous and were a joke, and they sold everything at the first race. And so they eventually gotten better, which that was Mike Hamby's part of the thing, as he worked on those T-shirts. That was his love of the whole deal, is promoting and selling, and he did good at it. And had it not been for the T-shirts, we may not have survived, because we were able to, at the IHRA races, we were able to sell our T-shirts. And I still get people today say, I still got one of your shirts. I have some guys that are really big come back with a size that might fit me. So I kind of grew out of that one. But people today still have those shirts from back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s.
How important was it for you to preserve that name that you went to even the lengths of trademarking? Very important. We put a lot of time. The name War Eagle has become kind of very... I would say sought after by many people from one car to another. And that was something that we spent a lot of years building up and coming up and through all the different ranks of what we did with it. And it was popular. And that related basically to me. And
when other people decide that they want to paint a War Eagle car or do something, a majority of them are very straightforward and honest, and they ask you. Some of them just go over your head, then you got to fight them over trademarks and stuff, and it's just that's a kind of a pain.
Finals of funny car, Dale Pulde, the California-based War Eagle, against Billy Meyer. Waco Willie, they call him. He's only 23 years old, has been driving a funny car since he was 16. Pulde, at the age of 27, in drag racing more than a decade. A close race as they lead the line together. And it's Pulde at the finish by just a little over a car length, 6.42 seconds. His speed, 234 miles an hour. In slow motion, you see him pull away from Billy Meyer just at the finish. So Dale Pulde wins his first national event title, the beautiful War Eagle from Van Nuys, California.
Our funny car champion, Dale Pulde, trying to crawl out of his car, get the breather mask off. I'm sure there's a big smile behind it somewhere in there. Boy, there is. You got to race about 10 years to do it, but feels good.
I'm telling you, it really feels great. I just can't wait to call my family and everything, tell everybody about it.
Actually, about a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years, I drove a car for Mike Hamby and Larry Christopherson. And we made it run way better than what it used to, and things were going along pretty good. And at the end of the season, Mike said, if you'd like to go racing again sometime, I'd really like to be a partner with you. We'd go racing and stuff if we could both find the money. And so about midsummer '76, Mike says, I got some money. Can you come up with some money? And I did. And we built a partnership. And I knew how to run the car, what I wanted to do with the car. And Mike was pretty good at merchandising and selling things and doing stuff, but he was very crafty about outfitting our trailers and building things for the trailers and stuff, and he was a good hard worker. Between the two of us, we knew that we were going to have to, step up to the plate pretty good, and we had to have a car that would perform okay, but we didn't want to hurt any parts, and I wouldn't leave home until we could make runs and not hurt parts. So we had a couple disastrous weekends of crazy stuff that happened and everything. We got our act together, and it started doing good. And so I called a guy named Ben Brown, I think it was RBN or something like that, but he was a booking agent for the funny cars. And he told me, don't bother coming back here. We got way more cars than we could ever imagine and ever need. So I said, okay, well, got on the phone, started booking the car myself. We weren't getting the real big money, but we weren't hurting, and it would make us survive. Well, we couldn't even afford our first motel bill. When we went, our first race was at US 30 in Gary, Indiana. And had we not collected our money from that, we'd have been in trouble. And we just knew that the car should run good and do what it needed to do. So that was basically the start of all of it. And word traveled around, the War Eagle car ran pretty darn good, and it would come back and run after run. And it was really an amazing, more than I thought it was going to be. It was just a real good, 77 was just a fantastic year. In '77, we decided we were going to go ahead and run the IHRA races and stuff, and run a few of the NHRA races. And we got treated really good by IHRA. We were able to sell our T-shirts and our wares and things that we had, which helped support the car. And it paid good money. At the end of the season, we were their new funny car world champion. But IHRA had a bonus out of the Pro Series of cars. The cars that had the Pro car that had the most points overall had a $10,000 bonus. And wouldn't you know, it came down to the last race, and I had to set a national record for IHRA and win the race, or at least go around more than Don Garlits. It's a pretty tough deal to have to go and fight Big Daddy Don Garlits and go up against him toe to toe. Well, we set the national record. We ran good. Come at the semifinal round, we broke our only engine of the year. The only one we hurt. We made it through the year, hardly ever hurt anything, and so we put this brand new engine in the car. Oh, this thing ought to run really great. Well, it didn't, and I got beat in the final round, and that took it away from it. But it was a goal to try to keep on, going for. It was good. IHRA was really good to us. We had, I always compare it with the Blue Max because it was a good running car at the time. And we were running into the situation that they were, is the car would drop cylinders, which you see at every race. You see that happening to some guys. And it was not as pronounced then as it is now. We were, and we had the single pump on it, the single mag. And we figured, well, we got to try something. It seemed to work for the Max, so let's put the dual mags in this thing.
And Pulde explodes an engine as he goes through the traps.
And that was the biggest fire I ever had. Right after that, the engine, we made like a half track run with the 2 mags in it, and it seemed really powerful, like it was really going to try to step up and do something. So the next run we said, okay, let's go for it. Well, the car got about 3/4 of the way down the track, and it leveled it. It blew the blower off it, tore part of the fuel pump out of the fuel shut off and everything out of the pump, so I had no way of shutting the fuel down from the thing. And by the time I got the car stopped, all I had to do was roll over. The seat belts were burned off, half the body was burned off. And lucky I didn't get burnt. Why, I don't know. I've had lesser fires and it got burnt.
Follows ignite. 615 miles per hour.
God, look at it. Oh my God. What happened?
615.
That thing's frying.
Ladies and gentlemen, do not go down to the top end of the racetrack. Stay on this end of the racetrack. You cannot do nothing but interfere down there. Do not go to the top end of the racetrack.
What did the man? Did the man die? Did the man got burned? Did the man got burned? We need the water truck down to the funny car at the end of the track right now, immediately.
That was the beginning of what was going to be our 84 season. We're going to just keep trying things and trying them until we come up with a combination that we liked. So we put on the Venny billet heads. So now we had the dual plugs and we had the big billet heads on it. And you never know at the racetrack, you go out there, once it ran good the whole race. But you unload it at the next racetrack, you think you switch cars. It just changed. And we kept trying it, and Mark Oswald said to me one day, he says, if you ever get that thing to go the whole quarter mile, we're going to be in trouble. And about 3 races later, we figured something out that would make it run good. And we set the low ET at the Summer Nationals with it at Englishtown, and it really ran. It was good. We went somewhere else, and it wouldn't run at all. But we would at that particular race, Mark says, you should have seen Leonard Hughes. Says you went out there and you backpedaled it a couple of times and that thing still ran a good number. And Leonard says, oh, we can't do that. We can't do that stuff. We can't deal with this. Well, everybody did. And everybody's got dual pumps now, or big pumps, and dual mags and the killer heads. And it's all, we didn't invent it, but it was all part of what became the thing to have.
Pulde had a disastrous season last year. He burned 1 car to the ground in testing. It seemed like every time he went down the racetrack, all the connecting rods would come out right in the light, costing $5,000 or $10,000. They think they have found the problem. All of the mechanics concentrate on that tree. Both drivers with a great lead, but Pulde stretches out a car length 100 feet out and hangs on to at least half of that. Dale Pulde wins it 574 to a 576. Incredible racing.
Couple of guys who are among the hardest working, most devoted men in this business. John Force and Dale Pulde. 2 men who have campaigned virtually everywhere funny cars have ever run, Steve Evans.
Boy, you called it, Brock. They have clawed their way to the upper echelon of professional drag racing, and now both of them wearing the corporate signatures that mean they've got, finally, the financial support they need.
What made you go with a Buick Somerset Regal?
John Asher, who was our PR guy, he knew Joe Negri, who was at Buick, and he was the head of their, I think it was their brand sales or something. I wasn't exactly sure. they got together, and there are so many people out there running Pontiacs and Dodges and stuff like that. And we had Miller for the sponsor, and they came up with a Somerset Regal is what Buick decided they'd like to build a car over. The Somerset Regal, we went and looked at it and said, what's this going to do, And we come up with some different ideas and designs, and Gary Aker, who was at GM and ran the wind tunnel at the time, he talked to us. He said, I guarantee you, this car will be cool. And he says, and it will run. Okay, so aerodynamics were starting to play a pretty darn big part in all the race cars and stuff. And the Buick Somerset was going to be what we had. So that was a sponsorship from Buick, and we figured we would make it work pretty good. And in '85, when we first come out with the first car, Jim Hume and Lance Larson brought the car to us in Bristol, Tennessee. It was a basic rolling chassis, all painted, ready to go on there, and but it wasn't finished. We worked for a couple of days prior to the race in Bristol, which was the biggest paying race of 1985, and put the car together. It went out there, it ran right on the national speed record, and it was a really cool looking car, and it ran good. And everybody liked the car. It was just, to this day, people just say that Buick was just something different looking. And we put it in the wind tunnel right after the Bristol race, and it performed every bit as good or better than the best Trans Am that had ever been out in the wind tunnel.
Serious business, and the pressure is a lot harder on us now. We're not only supporting ourselves and doing things for ourselves, we're actually carrying the name of Miller High Life and Quaker State and various other corporations now.
Color on the Somerset, which we call butterscotch, that car was going to be red, because all the Miller stuff was red at the time. For the new Buick Somerset, the paint becoming from red to a gold color is Miller changed to a new advertising agency. And we had a rendering into Miller done by John Pugh, all gold and red and all this stuff, like a beer bottle. And the guy from the advertising agency said, how come your cars are all red? Why don't you do them something like the color of your Miller beer? And they went back and got the rendering. He says, that's the one you want. And all the guys, the news guys and the press and the film crew at the end of the track, they knew from all the way down to the end of the track, when that car turned the corner, which car it was going to be. It had its own personality.
Just about evenly matched as far as ETs in the first round are concerned. That's right, they go to the starting line just a couple of hundredths apart. Engineers, they're ready. The blast of the productions, they leave right together. A little tired, so the bullet shot. McCulloch is out in the groove. It is Dale Pulde in a piston turning 582 whole shot victory. McCulloch is quicker at 5.80.
We were doing pretty good, and our next year was an option for sponsorship for Miller. And it was going to basically depend on how good we did that year. We were number 2 in NHRA, and we were number 1 in IHRA. There wasn't much better you were going to get than that unless you won them all. And we didn't get our answer. It didn't get turned down at Indy like what we thought. One way or the other, they were going to make a choice. And right before the last race at the end of the year, they said, no, we've decided to do the cars with Larry Minor. Basically, Larry Minor offered him 3 cars for what we needed for 1. And yeah, I couldn't compete with that. My partner Mike, he wanted to get out of the drag racing and go into the trucking business, and so he wanted out. So basically, I ran 1986, ran like 10 races out of our own pocket, and we did pretty fair. We had a good time, and it showed that we could still support ourselves pretty well off of what the car did, but I couldn't do it forever.
Till
until that point, Kenny Bernstein was having a dream of a season opener. In qualifying, he set a brand new world record at 5.48 seconds. No one had ever officially traveled the quarter-mile quicker in a funny car. In the first round, even though he had a bye run, still a stellar 5.61 elapsed time.
I did when Bernstein came out with the Batmobile car. I saw what was going to be done, what people are going to get by with and stuff, and I saw more expensive bodies, more expensive parts, and a lot more of them. And it's anything like drag race and any other kind of motorsport. It evolves out of better ideas, better parts, more parts, and a lot of guys will go out there and tear a lot of stuff up. In 1984, we burned up everything we thought we ever owned, trying to make the car run with 2 spark plugs and the big heads and all the stuff on it. And actually the only car that had 2 spark plugs before us was the Blue Max. And boy, we tore up some parts. But that was what led us into 1985, which is the best year we ever had, just learning. And that's how I see a lot of cars today. A lot of guys are going out there and they're trying and trying and trying, but fortunately they have a lot of money to put into it. A good group of them does.
You're looking at Dale Pulde, a 4-time Winter Nationals winner from SYLMAR, California. He'll be up against AMBERSON, who recently moved from Minnesota to California to take over the reins of this funny car. Now, Dale Pulde has far more cockpit experience than AMBERSON, and it shows right there. Pulde is off the mark first. AMBERSON was late, and Dale Pulde, a 5:40.
Well, I thought getting rid of my own car and bailing out of it because I didn't have any sponsor money, and I had to come out with some way. And Bill Schultz, who was headed up the In-N-Out Burger team, he said, why don't you just park that stuff or get rid of it and come and drive the In-N-Out Burger car? And to that particular time, that car had never gone past first round. And we went to the semifinals with it the first race, and a few more races later, we won the Winter Nationals. It's hard not being your own boss. And it got to the point where people said, oh, you're too old to keep doing this. You're too old. Well, I wasn't that old, but I got into some other cars, and I did real well in them. And it gave me another sense of confidence and stuff like that when I got out of, when I get into somebody's car that hasn't really been doing so great and make it a winner, or at least go the rounds with it and make it a competitor. So it kind of went from being the car owner to the driver who could help learn get the car running right. So I got a little more benefit out of that.
Mickey Thompson was a mentor, but tell me about your relationship with Joe Pisano.
When I first started driving a car, Joe Pisano's first funny car Camaro was being down painted at Clyde Morgan's paint shop, which where Charlie painted cars, and he kept his car. And I met Joe, and I helped sand on the car and did stuff and everything. And he'd always tell me, he said, you ever want to go to the... He says, give me a call, and just go to the gate. And he says, I'll get you in. And he did, all the time. And we became friends. And we always... he always stayed on top of what I was doing, always treated me like a son, basically. And we had a lot of laughs together and all. And he called me one day, and he says, I need something. Well, I drove his truck back from Englishtown and a lot of other stuff and everything, or he needed me to go pick something up, I'd go pick it up for him. Or in fact, he even used my tractor, I should say, for half of a season when I wasn't racing. And so I thought we were pretty close. And he used to tell Steve Montrelli, he says, don't hurt my boy, don't hurt my boy. And Steve would get so angry about it. But it was, he knew that Joe was basically kidding, but being a crew chief, and Steve was pretty temperamental and stuff, and got his feelings hurt pretty bad because he had a lot of pride, but still does. But Joe called me up, and he says, I need a favor. And I said, what's that? And he says, I need a driver. And I says, you need me to talk to you about a driver? And he said, no, I want you to drive the car. And I says, well, you know what that does to friendships? And he says, I think we're old enough to be over that. And I told him we had a discussion about things that he wouldn't stand for, and things that I didn't think I could stand for. We had a good agreement, and my hair was down to my shoulders. Nobody knew I was taking the car. The car was all ready to go. And came in, got the race car one evening, me and Mike Steege, and took it to Denver. And I drove in the gate. Nobody even recognized who I was. And Del Worsham walked up to Mike, says, hey, where's Glenn Mikers? Because he had been driving the car. And it's not the way I kind of like to get a ride or take a ride or whatever it was. And that was between Joe and Glenn. And he turned around, pointed to Dell. There's our driver, and he went out and looked. And said, "Oh, it's you!" It's kind of a funny deal. And within a half an hour's time, I'd gotten in the car to make a half pass at Denver, and towing up the return road, Joe died. So I'd lost my ride, my job, one of my best friends, like a second father to me, all at one time. And when losing Joe hurt a lot of people. He was loved by so many people, and so many times I wish I could pick up the phone and just call him or my dad. But Joe is just something special that all the racers will tell you. We call him Papa Joe for a reason. Basically at the end of my driving career, even though I was driving the Nostalgia Funny car, all of a sudden my year of 2010, man, I just never felt right. I just didn't have the energy and the get up and go. And we just got the car right at the last race of the year for the Nostalgia car. We figured it out a little bit better, and we had a competitive car. On the way home, I started getting this cough that I got every year for 6 years, and it didn't go away. And I kept getting sicker and sicker, and kept getting night sweats, and I just couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. And they thought I had tuberculosis, they thought I had cancer, and who knows what else they thought I had. And I spent a lot of time in and out of the hospitals trying to figure out what it was. And another Nostalgia racer, ex-fuel racer, Jack Harris from Utah, he sent me a fax. He said, "Dale," he says, "you have that same cough and that same sound a lot I did over a year ago." And he says it was very easy for him to find it with me because in Salt Lake City, they're mining for Indian artifacts, and a lot of people are coming down with valley fever. It's got some long name like coccidiomyosis or something like that. And so I took it to my doctor, and he said, "I had no idea you spent that much time in Kern County and Bakersfield and those kind of areas." And I said, "Yeah, that's a lot of time there." And he says, "Okay, I'm gonna call the head of UCLA's pulmonary division, and I'm gonna get a hold of him and tell him what we think we've got." So they sent me there, and come out, I had this disease called valley fever. And they took it kind of lightly, put me on some pills and everything that's supposed to take away the effects of it. You can't cure it. They have no cure for it. But it was basically a fungus that sets up in your lungs. And I was out for like 2 weeks. I took these pills, and I kept feeling worse, and got absolutely just to where I couldn't hardly do anything or talk on the phone. So I called the doctor. He says, "Well, we got your last scan back from Wednesday." He says, "It all looks the same." He said, come on in on Monday morning. I'll be there at 7 in the morning. Let's go over this some more." I said, "Okay." So Sunday night, about midnight, my stomach's all swollen up, and I can't hardly breathe. And Valerie picked me up and threw me in her car and took me to the hospital. And they filled me full of morphine until he got in there. They went down, ran another scan on me. He says, "If I would have saw this scan on Wednesday and the one you have today, I'd say they got them mixed up." He says, "You're going to go get operated on." He said, "You got about an hour left." And boom, we went up there, and they drained a 1.5 liters of fungus and bacteria out of my lungs. Then they went in a week later and went in down to the lower part of my back, this far down. They threaded it through like a needle, and to get it in to drain that. And I drained 500 cc's out at the first hit, and drowned about another 350 cc's out after that. And within a few weeks, I felt pretty good. I just didn't have a lot of energy. Okay, starting to get my energy back and everything, but I couldn't. I had to stay under medication quite a while, all through mostly the summer of 2011, and I got a chance to go drive my race car again. But prior to that, I would have never thought at the beginning of the year in February that I was within an hour of dying. And come to find out that it's a disease that comes from within the dirt, and if you inhale it enough, and sometimes they call it the one breath disease. All you need is inhale one breath, and there's 15 trillion spores in a 1 inch square of dirt. And it's just, I learned so much more about everything and about the whole thing. And then I think it was about 2 years ago, the prison in Coalinga, California, between the guards and the prisoners, they lost 35 people. And nobody knew nothing about this stuff. And so I'm sitting there, Valerie's running my forklift, and she's loading a racer's truck and putting nitro in it so he can take it back to, of all things, Famoso in McFarland. And he said, "What's wrong with you?" And I told him, I said, "Well, you ever heard of valley fever?" The guy says, "Yeah, I'm the warden at the prison in McFarland. We have people die from it all the time." Before I got it, I'd never even heard of it, other than a race car from Fresno called themselves Valley Fever. And I thought it was pretty funny, because Mike, who was one of the owners of that car, I asked him, "Why did you name your car Valley Fever?" And he says, "Because we wanted to be the guys that come from the other side of the hill that you didn't want to mess with." And he said, "That's Valley Fever." I like for people to remember me as a driver who could get the job done, who could take a unperforming car and get it into the winner's circle. A driver that drove over 70 different nitro funny cars, never bought one ride, got it all from what I earned, and I've never turned one over. Burned a lot of them up, but I never wrecked one or turned it over. And I think that's, for a drag racer, that's a pretty decent legacy, I think. Anytime we won, I was just as happy as can be. To win, it wasn't just something I expected. It was something I was glad to have. It was kind of a different sort of way of being a rock star. You know, by far, I'm not a rock star by any means, but a lot of my life I led like one. I didn't do drugs though.